Marcus considered his existence a finely tuned instrument, each day a methodical sweep across the vast, intricate landscapes of history. His small, precisely ordered apartment, filled with the scent of aged paper and lukewarm tea, reflected this philosophy. Dust motes, caught in the late afternoon light, danced above stacks of meticulously catalogued monographs and first editions. He was a historian, a scholar of the verifiable, the documented, the immutable past. Conjecture held no interest. Only fact mattered. The arrival of the letter had been an intrusion. Its heavy cream paper and archaic wax seal felt anachronistic, almost theatrical. He had opened it with a precise slice of his letter opener, revealing the ornate script within. A distant relative, a great-aunt he had never known, had passed. And Marcus, to his profound bewilderment, was named the sole heir to his estate, Blackwood Manor. He remembered the subsequent visit from the solicitor, a gaunt man with a perpetually anxious expression, who had spoken of the manor in hushed, almost reverent tones. "It's isolated, Mr. Thorne. Very old. And it has a reputation." The solicitor had paused, clearing his throat. "Local legends, you understand. Unfortunate incidents over the centuries. Nothing, of course, that a rational mind couldn't explain." Marcus had merely nodded, his gaze unwavering. He understood. Remote rural communities often bred such superstitions, born of ignorance and a lack of proper historical documentation. He saw not a curse, but a challenge. An archaeological dig into the past. A chance to peel back layers of folklore and reveal the mundane truths beneath. Blackwood Manor, he decided, was merely another text awaiting his critical analysis. The journey began 2 days later. Marcus had packed only essentials: a satchel of research materials, a sturdy flashlight, and a thermos of strong black coffee. His sedan, usually confined to quiet urban streets, now ate up miles of increasingly desolate highway. The landscape shifted from cultivated fields to dense, untamed forest, the trees growing taller, their shadows deepening even in the midday sun. The air grew cooler, carrying the damp scent of pine and rich, dark earth. He entered the mountain pass in the late afternoon, the road narrowing to a winding ribbon carved into the rock face. The sky above was a bruised gray, promising rain. This was a place designed for solitude, for secrets. Hours later, as twilight bled into a premature dusk, the road abruptly ended. Or rather, it dissolved into a crumbling, unpaved track that snaked upwards through an even denser thicket of trees. Blackwood Manor, the solicitor had warned, was not easily found. He had not exaggerated. Marcus engaged the car's four-wheel drive, the vehicle lurching and groaning as it ascended the rough incline. Tree branches, heavy with moisture, scraped against the windows, sounding like skeletal fingers dragging across glass. Then, through a sudden break in the canopy, it appeared. Blackwood Manor was not a house. It was a monolith. Turrets, their slate roofs crumbling, pierced the gloom like broken teeth. A pervasive smell of dampness and decay hung heavy in the air, a scent that seemed to emanate directly from the stone itself. The only sound was the sighing of the wind through the ancient trees and the distant, mournful cry of an unseen bird. The air was thick, heavy, carrying the metallic tang of impending rain and something else, something indefinable, yet deeply unsettling. It was the smell of stagnation, of time itself curdling within those walls. He looked up at the manor. It was immense, far larger than he had anticipated, its architecture a haphazard jumble of styles from different centuries, as if it had grown organically, absorbing bits and pieces of history into its very fabric. The main entrance, a massive oak door studded with rusted iron, was framed by two crumbling gargoyles whose stone faces were worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. He was a rational man. He did not believe in bad vibes or malevolent presences. Yet, as he stood before Blackwood Manor, a distinct weight pressed down on him, a sensation of being observed, not by a single pair of eyes, but by something vast and ancient that encompassed the entire structure. The house did not merely stand, it brooded. He pushed the thought away, dismissing it as fatigue and the dramatic effect of the setting. This was simply a very old, very neglected building. Nothing more. He had come here to strip away the veneer of legend, to unearth the truth. He walked towards the massive door, the gravel crunching beneath his boots, each step echoing in the profound stillness that Blackwood Manor seemed to command. The rented vehicle, a sturdy utilitarian model, shuddered its way up the final precarious incline of the mountain pass. Below, the world receded into a patchwork of muted greens and browns, an indifferent landscape that had long since surrendered to the encroaching wilderness. Marcus, however, felt no sense of isolation, only anticipation. The manor, a hulking silhouette against the bruised sky, was not an escape, but a destination. A challenge. He steered the car through the crumbling gateposts, the iron hinges groaning in protest, and brought it to a halt on the gravel sweep before the main entrance. The air, thin and sharp with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, offered no welcome. It was simply air. The house itself loomed, a testament to bygone eras and forgotten architects, its leaded windows like vacant eyes. He retrieved the heavy iron key from his pocket, its cold weight familiar now, and inserted it into the lock. The mechanism grated, then yielded with a resonant thunk that echoed through the cavernous foyer. Inside, the silence was immediate and profound, broken only by the settling of dust motes in the faint light filtering through grimy panes. Marcus surveyed the grand, albeit neglected space. His gaze was not one of apprehension, but of professional assessment. The peeling wallpaper, the cracked plaster, the pervasive mustiness, all were merely symptoms of neglect, data points in a larger historical narrative he intended to uncover. Over the next 2 days, Marcus dedicated himself to the monumental task of organizing his research. Boxes upon boxes, filled with meticulously cataloged documents, rare books, and copies of obscure regional archives, were ferried from the vehicle into the vast, echoing library. He worked with a focused intensity, arranging his materials on the long, dust-sheathed tables he had cleared, creating an intricate web of historical data. Each volume, each file, represented a piece of the puzzle, a fragment of truth waiting to be reassembled. He was deep into the process, cross-referencing a regional census from the late 17th century with a land deed, when a sudden, distinct chill prickled the skin on his forearm. It was an abrupt drop in temperature, localized and sharp, a stark contrast to the otherwise stale, ambient air of the library. Marcus paused, his pen hovering over the parchment. He glanced around the cavernous room, noting the ill-fitting window frames, the gaps beneath the heavy oak doors. An old house, he thought, 1,000 drafts. He shrugged, attributing it to the manor's poor insulation, a structural flaw rather than an anomaly, and returned to his work. He froze, listening intently. It was a sound like dry leaves skittering across a stone floor, or the hushed turning of pages in an unseen hand. He waited, his senses alert. The sound did not repeat. The house settling, he concluded, or perhaps the wind finding a loose pane in one of the higher, less visible windows. He made a mental note to investigate the integrity of the window seals the following morning. The structure was old. It creaked. It groaned. Such things were to be expected. On the third morning, a minor inconvenience presented itself. He had distinctly remembered placing the leather-bound copy of Architectural Anomalies of the Gothic Period on the lowest shelf of the temporary bookcase he had erected, its spine outward for easy access. He scanned the shelf again, then the surrounding tables. The book was gone. A flicker of annoyance, quickly suppressed. He knew he hadn't moved it. He must have, he reasoned. Fatigue. He must have been more tired than he realized when he unpacked it. A momentary frown touched his brow. He picked it up, a faint residue of dust clinging to its cover, and returned it to its intended place. His own absent-mindedness, nothing more. The mind played tricks when confronted with an overwhelming amount of information and a new environment. It was while clearing out a heavy, ornate desk in a small adjoining study, a room he planned to use as his primary writing space, that he made a more substantial discovery. Beneath a false bottom in one of the drawers, concealed by a thin, warped sheet of cedar, lay a small, leather-bound journal and a bundle of yellowed letters tied with a frayed silk ribbon. They were not part of his expected archives, clearly not related to the manor's foundational history, but rather personal effects of a previous inhabitant. Marcus, ever the historian, felt a familiar thrill. Primary sources, uncatalogued and intimate. He carefully untied the ribbon, its silk crumbling slightly at his touch, and opened the journal. The handwriting was spidery, elegant, yet increasingly erratic as the entries progressed. He scanned the first few pages, noting the date, nearly a century old. Day 14. The portrait in the Great Hall. Marcus swore it shifted. My gaze is failing. This place wears on one's resolve. The solitude is profound. He flipped forward a few more pages, his brow furrowing slightly. Entry 32, the silver locket, gone. Marcus left it on the dresser. Now? Nothing. It mocks me. This house mocks me. Or am Marcus finally losing my grip? The language grew more agitated, the pen strokes heavier, sometimes scratching through previous words. He picked up one of the letters, unfolding it with extreme care. The paper crackled like dry autumn leaves. They speak of forgotten names, of things best left buried in the earth. My memory. It fragments like glass. Marcus cannot recall where Marcus placed the master key. It was here, just yesterday. The housekeeper, she looks at me with pity. He believes Marcus am unwell, but it is not me. It is this place. Marcus laid the journal and letters back on the desk. He traced the faded ink with a fingertip. The previous owner, a fragile mind perhaps, susceptible to the isolation, prone to delusion. It was a common enough phenomenon in remote, grand houses. People grew eccentric, their perceptions warped by solitude and an excess of time. The house, in its age and scale, could easily seem to possess a personality, to a mind already predisposed to such interpretations. The manor was not malevolent, it was merely old. And he, Marcus, was here to prove it. Marcus returned to the study, the previous owner's unsettling account still echoing in his mind. He arranged the journals and correspondence methodically on the vast mahogany desk. Delusion, he had concluded. A fragile mind, perhaps, susceptible to the profound isolation of a place like this. He, Marcus, was different. His intellect, his rigorous skepticism, would serve as an impenetrable shield against such irrationality. He was a historian, a man of facts and verifiable evidence, not fanciful narratives. He dedicated the following days to an exhaustive survey of the manor's library. Volumes on local history, ancient land deeds, and obscure theological texts lined the towering shelves. Now, a faint, almost imperceptible metallic tang seemed to overlay it, like old iron filings. He worked late into the evenings, the glow of a single desk lamp carving a small circle of light from the pervasive gloom. It began subtly. A soft scraping sound, like fingernails dragging across stone from the wall behind a bookcase. Marcus paused, his pen hovering over a brittle parchment. He listened. Nothing. He attributed it to the house settling, the groaning of ancient timbers. A few hours later, a distinct whisper seemed to brush past his ear, too indistinct to form words, too fleeting to be real. He swiveled in his chair, scanning the shadowed corners of the room. The heavy drapes hung motionless. The flame of the oil lamp remained steady. He shook his head, a wry smile touching his lips. Fatigue. The mind played tricks when deprived of proper rest. Sleep, however, offered little respite. The first night, a dream of being trapped within a labyrinth of endless corridors. The walls themselves shifting and breathing around him. The following night, the dreams grew more vivid. They were always alone, always isolated, their features contorting in silent agony. He pushed the discomfort aside, determined to find a rational explanation for everything. His research led him deeper into the manor's lineage. He found old ledgers, faded property transfers, and personal letters spanning centuries. A pattern began to emerge, initially too faint to be anything more than coincidence. He cross-referenced names and dates, meticulously noting their fates. The first owner, a recluse, died alone in the manor, his body discovered weeks later by a servant. The cause of death listed as apoplexy, but the local folklore he unearthed spoke of a man driven to speaking with the walls. The second, a young woman, inherited the estate after her family perished in a cholera outbreak. She stayed for only 2 years before disappearing. The local constable's report mentioned a search extending to the treacherous curves of the mountain pass, but no trace was ever found. The prevailing theory, then, was that he had fallen from one of the precarious ledges. But Marcus found no evidence of any such attempt, only a cryptic entry in hymn diary about the voices in the stone. Then there were the suicides, a staggering number. 3 distinct instances over 2 centuries, all by residents who had lived in the manor for prolonged periods, always in isolation. A landowner who hanged himself in the library. A scholar who drowned himself in the stagnant pond on the grounds. And the previous owner, whose journal Marcus had just read, whose official cause of death was a fall down the main staircase. Then a sudden violent end or an inexplicable vanishing. It was more than isolation. It was a pattern, too consistent, too specific. The common thread was not just solitude, but the manor itself. The way the narratives intertwined with the physical structure, the way the descriptions of mental decline mirrored the previous owner's descent. He looked up from the documents, his gaze sweeping across the ancient, silent library. The metallic tang in the air seemed stronger now, almost sharp. The walls, once a symbol of history and permanence, now felt like something else entirely. Something observant. Something patient. The incomplete sentence about the third suicide hung in Marcus's mind like a frayed rope. He traced the faded ink on the page, a brittle chronicle of despair. The third instance, a recluse, had simply vanished, leaving behind only a meticulously organized study and an open journal detailing a slow, creeping forgetfulness, followed by an overwhelming sense of being erased. Marcus pushed the heavy tome away, the leather cover cool beneath his palm. 3 lives, extinguished or absorbed, all within these very walls. His historian's mind, accustomed to dissecting facts, struggled to categorize such an end. He dismissed it as the house's inherent mustiness. The sun, a pale winter disk, cast long, weak shadows across the polished floorboards, highlighting dust motes dancing in the stillness. A chill permeated the room, deeper than the drafts from the ill-fitting windows. It felt less like cold air, and more like a pervasive dampness, seeping into bone. Later that afternoon, while Marcus was cataloging a collection of old maps in the study, a sudden sharp scent of lavender and pipe tobacco filled the air. It was so distinct, so immediate, that he instinctively looked up. The room, usually smelling of dust and dry wood, now carried the ghost of a presence. He felt a fleeting sensation, as if a warm, heavy hand had just brushed his shoulder. Marcus spun around, his heart giving a small, unwelcome lurch. Nothing. The study was empty, the air still. The scent dissipated as quickly as it had arrived, leaving only the faint, familiar mustiness. It was a trick of the old house, he decided, a pocket of trapped air, a peculiar draft. That night, the dreams began. They were not dreams in the conventional sense, not nebulous images from his subconscious. These were stark, vivid replays. He found himself standing in the drawing room, but it was different. The furniture was heavier, draped in richer fabrics. He could hear her ragged breathing, the soft click of her knitting needles. Then, a man's voice, low and urgent, emanating from the corner of the room, speaking words Marcus couldn't quite grasp, but the tone was one of increasingly frantic desperation. The scene dissolved into a swirling mist, leaving him gasping awake in his bed, the taste of ash in his mouth. He tried to rationalize it the next morning over a mug of lukewarm coffee. Stress, the isolation, the morbid history he was unearthing. His mind was playing tricks, stitching together fragments of historical data into a narrative. He needed a change of scenery, a break from the manor's suffocating atmosphere. He decided to drive into the nearest village for supplies, a journey that would take him through the winding mountain pass. The drive through the mountain pass was a welcome distraction. The raw, cold air and the stark beauty of the snow-dusted peaks offered a temporary reprieve. But even there, away from the manor, a subtle unease clung to him. The sense of an unseen presence, vague and formless, had begun to follow him. Upon his return, the manor seemed to exhale as he stepped through the heavy oak door. The air inside felt thicker, more expectant. As he walked toward the library, a new vision seized him. This time, it was a sound. The distinct, wet gurgle of a drowning man, followed by a faint splash. He stopped dead in the hallway, his breath catching. The sound was so immediate, so real, as if it had occurred just beyond the wall. He clutched the doorknob, his knuckles white. He spent the rest of the evening poring over the records again, specifically the mention of the scholar who had drowned himself. The house was not merely haunted by echoes, it was replaying its cruelest acts, like a predator savoring its kills. His skepticism, once an unyielding fortress, was now riddled with fissures. He was no longer dismissing these occurrences as mere coincidence or psychological projection. There was a malevolent intelligence at play. The house was not just a structure. It was a hungry entity, its walls saturated with the suffering it had witnessed, and perhaps orchestrated. He felt it now, a subtle drain on his own vitality, a creeping mental fog. His memories, sharp and ordered just days ago, seemed to possess a slight, unsettling blur around the edges. He found himself forgetting why he had entered a room, or struggling to recall a specific detail from his own past. The sensation was not just that of being watched, but of being absorbed. His identity slowly dissolving into the ancient, hungry fabric of the house. The third instance, a recluse, had simply vanished, leaving behind only a meticulously organized study and an open journal detailing a slow, insidious consumption of the mind. The words, though not explicitly written, formed themselves in Marcus's thoughts, a chilling completion to the prior inhabitant's final entry. The journal described a gradual erosion, a loss of the self that mirrored the physical decay of the manor's older wings. A prickle of unease, sharp and cold, snaked down Marcus's spine. He recognized the pattern. The increasing reclusiveness, the fading interest in the outside world, the obsession with the house's history. These were not merely scholarly pursuits, but symptoms. He pushed back from the heavy oak desk, the chair scraping against the polished floorboards with an unnaturally loud shriek. He needed distance. He needed to step outside, to breathe air that didn't feel perpetually stale, to see a sky that wasn't filtered through ancient, grimy panes. He walked to the main door, his footsteps echoing in the vast, silent hall. The air grew heavy around him, a palpable resistance. Each step felt laborious, as if he were wading through thick, invisible water. A strange lethargy began to bloom in his limbs, an inviting warmth that urged him to stop, to simply lean against the wall and let the house envelop him. He fought it, pushing the heavy oak door open with a grunt. The drive down the winding gravel path was a jarring experience. He navigated the turns, the tires crunching on loose stones, until he reached the mountain pass. Below, the valley stretched out, a patchwork of muted greens and browns, hinting at the distant connected world. The sight, usually a balm, now felt distant and unreal, like a photograph. He stopped the car, the engine idling, a low thrum against the vast quiet. An immense weight settled on his chest, a profound and inexplicable reluctance to proceed. It wasn't fear of the unknown, but a deep-seated apprehension of leaving. The air outside, though fresh, felt less substantial, less real than the air within the manor's walls. He pulled out his mobile phone. No signal. He drove a little further, past the crest of the pass, then tried again. Still nothing. The small bars on the screen remained stubbornly empty. He tried his laptop, hoping for an email connection. The Wi-Fi icon, which had been erratic for days, now displayed a definitive no internet access. He walked back to the manor, tried the old landline in the study. The outside world had gone quiet. The house, it seemed, had drawn a curtain around him. A perverse sense of relief washed over him as the manor's imposing silhouette emerged through the trees on his return. The heavy oak door seemed to welcome his back with a silent, ancient sigh. He could almost discern a low, almost imperceptible hum resonating through the floorboards, a sound he hadn't noticed before. A pulse. Days blurred into an indistinct sequence. Marcus found himself neglecting his personal well-being with increasing indifference. He hadn't shaved in what felt like a week, his chin bristling with a coarse stubble. His clothes, once meticulously chosen, were now rumpled and stained, worn without thought. Meals became an afterthought, often forgotten entirely, or consumed mechanically without appetite, fueled by a vague sense of obligation rather than hunger. The historical research, once a passion, now felt less like an active pursuit and more like a passive absorption, a slow drowning in the manor's past. One afternoon, while reviewing a stack of his own meticulously handwritten notes, he paused. He had been compiling a timeline of the manor's previous inhabitants, cross-referencing dates, events, and familial connections. His mother had never owned a silver locket. He had despised jewelry. And the photograph, there was no seaside town in her family history. His mother had always spoken of her childhood home as nestled deep in the mountains, far from any coast. The house wasn't just influencing his thoughts, it was feeding. It was consuming his very past. A slow, creeping despair that had culminated in his disappearance. Marcus traced the faded ink on the page, the brittle chronicle of a life dissolving. The third instance. Not a dramatic end, but a quiet erasure. He closed the journal, the soft thud echoing in the vast, silent library. He stood, his joints protesting, and moved towards the grand fireplace, its hearth long cold. The light from the tall, grimy windows was fading, painting the room in shades of bruised purple and deep gray. He had intended to continue his research, to find the next ledger, the next diary. But a profound weariness settled over him, a lethargy that felt foreign, yet disturbingly familiar. He decided to seek out the kitchen, to prepare a simple meal. A tangible, mundane act might anchor him. Yet, as he turned from the library, the corridor that should have led directly to the main hall seemed to stretch, its proportions subtly distorted. He blinked, a faint tremor of unease stirring within him. The house was playing tricks with the dying light, he told himself, a trick of the eye. The corridor felt longer than he remembered, the journey to the main hall extending into an almost absurd duration. He passed a door, ornate and heavy, which he was certain had not been there before. Curiosity warred with a nascent apprehension. Finally, he reached the Great Hall, or what he thought was the Great Hall. He rubbed his temples, a dull ache throbbing behind his eyes. He must be more tired than he thought, his memory playing false. He stared at them, the stern faces of forgotten men and women gazing back. He knew this man. But how? A profound disorientation settled over him. He reached up, touching his beard, feeling the familiar stubble. Yet for a fleeting moment, his mind supplied the sensation of a clean-shaven jaw. He turned towards the main entrance, pulling at the heavy oak door. It groaned open, revealing not the sprawling, overgrown gardens he expected, but a narrow, winding path cutting through dense, unfamiliar woods. He knew this place. He knew it. A sudden, vivid memory flared. The biting wind whipping at his cloak, the desperate scramble over loose scree, the crushing certainty that escape was impossible. He remembered a broken leg, the agonizing crawl back, the manor's lights a distant, mocking gleam. He had never worn a cloak. His leg was fine. The great door slammed shut behind him with a resounding boom, sealing him in. He turned, pressing his back against the solid wood, his eyes scanning the hall. The two symmetrical staircases were gone, replaced by the single sweeping curve he initially remembered. The antechamber of portraits was nowhere to be seen. He was lost. Not just in the manor's shifting layout, but within himself. The lines blurred, past and present merging into a terrifying confluence. He was Marcus, the historian seeking truth. But he was also Arthur, the recluse, desperate to escape. He could feel the manor's vast, silent intelligence pressing in, sifting through his thoughts, his memories, plucking at the threads of his identity. It was not merely haunting him. It was consuming him, dissolving the very essence of who he was. The resonance of the past, a chilling echo of erased lives, propelled Marcus forward. The manor itself seemed to resist his inquiries, not with overt displays of spectral activity, but with a more insidious, almost organic, opposition. Rooms he had sworn were empty would suddenly contain a dislodged book, face down, open to a specific passage. A single cold draft would snake through a seemingly sealed corridor, carrying with it the faintest scent of something metallic, like old blood mixed with iron filings. His nights grew restless. Sleep offered no true respite, only a series of fractured, indistinct images. A woman's face, pale and distant. A child's laughter, muffled and sorrowful. A long, empty hallway stretching into an impossible distance. He often woke with a physical ache, a dull throb behind his eyes, and a pervasive exhaustion that no amount of rest seemed to alleviate. But the feeling persisted, a constant, low-frequency hum beneath his skin. He spent days poring over the remaining journals, the family chronicles, the architectural plans he'd unearthed. The manor's history was a tapestry woven with threads of quiet disappearances and gradual mental declines. One particularly disturbing passage, penned by a distant ancestor named Elias, described the house's hunger, an abstract concept that Elias himself seemed to struggle to articulate, yet felt with terrifying certainty. It takes, not objects, not gold. It takes the very knowing of who you are, the memories, the thoughts, the essence. The ink on that page was smudged, as if the writer's hand had trembled violently. Marcus found himself increasingly disoriented. He would enter a room with a specific purpose, only to find the intention had evaporated, leaving a blank space in his mind. He'd misplace his spectacles, only to find them resting on a shelf he swore he'd just cleared. The precise details of his journey to the manor began to blur. He could almost feel the vibration of the steering wheel, the hum of the engine. But then, a subtle distortion would creep in. Was it morning or afternoon? Was the sky clear or overcast? The details shifted, like sand underfoot, leaving him with a vague, unsettling impression rather than a concrete recollection. This erosion of his own recent past felt more sinister than any ghost story. The faint, organic smell, previously intermittent, became a more constant presence, a subtle mustiness that hinted at something deeper than mere decay. It wasn't the smell of rot, but something akin to fertile soil, or perhaps a deep, undisturbed root system. The disappearances weren't supernatural vanishings in the traditional sense. The mental deterioration wasn't mere madness. The manor wasn't haunted by something. It was the something. It was a vast, silent predator, rooted deep in the earth, its ancient stones and timbers merely its physical manifestation. It fed, not on blood, not on flesh, but on the intangible yet vital components of human consciousness. Memories, the delicate threads of sanity, the very spark of life force that animated its inhabitants. Each forgotten detail, each moment of confusion, each wave of inexplicable fatigue was a small, silent consumption. It was a slow, deliberate feast, stretching across centuries, growing stronger, more complex, with each mind it absorbed. Marcus stared at the journal entry again. The words, "The house's hunger," no longer abstract, but terrifyingly literal. He wasn't a guest in a haunted house. He was the current, preferred meal. The realization settled in his chest like a block of ice, heavy and unyielding. The constant exhaustion, the fragmented memories, the insidious feeling of being watched, not by eyes, but by the very walls around him. It all clicked into place. The manor wasn't just influencing him. It was actively, methodically consuming him. The slow, creeping despair that had consumed his ancestors, culminating in their quiet erasure, was not a symptom of their environment, but the direct result of the entity's feeding. He was being drained, piece by agonizing piece, his identity slowly dissolving into the ancient, hungry fabric of Blackwood Manor. He was trapped, not by physical barriers, but by an entity that was already inside his head, already picking through the contents of his mind. The manor pulsed, not with a sound, but a pervasive internal tremor that resonated deep within Marcus's bones. The haze that had so often clouded his thoughts, an insidious fog seeping into his very perception, receded for a brutal, crystalline moment. The house was not merely old stone and timber, not merely a repository of forgotten lives. It was a conscious, malevolent entity, a predator that had been patiently, meticulously consuming him. The realization was a cold, pure terror, devoid of the muddled confusion that had become his constant companion. He was being eaten, not by teeth, but by a pervasive spiritual hunger that gnawed at his memories, his sanity, his very sense of self. A desperate, primal surge of resistance flared within him. He would not be another ghost in its sprawling maw. The house had been resisting his inquiries, yes, but he had been resisting its truth. Now he saw it. He felt it. His breath hitched, a ragged sound in the cavernous silence. He needed to find a way out, a way to fight back, a way to destroy this colossal living tomb. His gaze swept the library, the room where the past often felt most tangible, most immediate. Dust motes danced in the anemic light, filtering through the grime-caked panes, swirling like miniature specters. He moved with a frantic, uncoordinated energy, his hands tearing at leather-bound tomes, yanking them from their shelves. Paperbacks, ancient scrolls, forgotten ledgers. He flung them aside, the sharp scent of decaying paper and dry rot filling his nostrils. He remembered a fleeting sensation from weeks ago. A subtle draft, a slightly cooler temperature near a particular section of the wall behind a towering oak bookshelf. He pushed against the shelf with all his might, grunting with effort. The wood groaned, a deep, resonant complaint, but it did not budge. The house was pushing back. He felt it. Not physically, but a profound, almost spiritual inertia, a resistance that seemed to emanate from the very fabric of the structure. He tried again, this time searching for a latch, a seam, anything that suggested an opening. His fingers traced the intricate carvings, the worn edges of the wood. The faint scent of metallic dust mingled with the omnipresent odor of decay. His fingers brushed against a barely perceptible groove, disguised within a decorative border. He pressed, and with a soft, almost inaudible click, a section of the shelf, no wider than his forearm, slid inward. He plunged his arm into the cool, stagnant air. His fingers closed around something solid, something wrapped in brittle, desiccated cloth. He pulled it out. The leather was so dry it cracked as he opened it, releasing a faint puff of dust. The language itself was an obscure dialect of Old English, peppered with Latin phrases and symbols he had only ever seen in rare, esoteric texts. He scanned the cramped, desperate entries, his mind racing to translate, to decipher. The journal belonged to a man named Silas, a previous inhabitant, one who had understood the manor's true nature. Silas had also resisted. The entries detailed the house's insidious hunger, its blurring of time and memory. Silas had discovered a weakness, an ancient ritual not to destroy the manor, for it was too deeply rooted, but to sever its connection to its chosen prey, to starve it. The ritual was convoluted, dangerous, requiring specific components and a precise execution. It spoke of a binding stone and a weeping root, both to be brought from outside the manor's immediate influence. Marcus's eyes fixed on the words, scrawled with an almost frantic urgency. At the precipice, where the winds keen and the earth bleeds stone, the ancient past demands its due. Only there, under the eye of the old watcher, can the severance be wrought. The mountain pass, the very one that coiled like a sleeping serpent around the manor's isolated valley, the only route in or out. He had dismissed it as a mere geographical feature, a barrier. Now he understood. It was a critical component of Silas's desperate, terrifying plan. The journal described a precise arrangement of the binding stone and weeping root at a specific cairn on the mountain pass, to be performed at the cusp of a specific celestial alignment. The act, Silas wrote, would create a temporary potent dissonance, a psychic shockwave that would force the manor to recoil, to release its grip, at least on the individual who performed the ritual. It was not a destruction, but an expulsion, a chance to escape, to break free from the malevolent entity's hold. The information was a terrifying burden, a fragile, perilous lifeline. The house, he knew, would sense his intentions. It would fight him. But for the first time in weeks, perhaps months, he saw a path, however narrow, however fraught with unseen dangers. He clutched the journal, its ancient leather warm beneath his trembling fingers. He was no longer merely a victim. He was a combatant, armed with a terrible, fragile knowledge. The glimmer of resistance had ignited. The mountain pass. Now he understood. The journal described the pass not as a boundary to keep things out, but as a funnel, a constricting channel designed to contain, to concentrate the manor's malevolence, to prevent its spread beyond the valley. Silas, in his final, deluded efforts, had sought to make the house self-consuming, to turn its hunger inward until it devoured itself. The mountain pass was the choke point, the seal, and Marcus, in his ignorance, had been slowly weakening it, allowing its influence to seep. A cold certainty settled over Marcus. Silas hadn't been trying to destroy the house, not entirely. He had been trying to starve it, to contain it, to make it turn on its own essence. And Marcus, by simply existing within its walls, by exploring, by knowing, was disrupting that delicate, horrific balance. He had to reach the pass, had to understand the mechanisms Silas had put in place before the manor's hunger became insurmountable. He pushed himself from the desk, the heavy leather of Silas's journal still warm beneath his fingertips. A low groan resonated from the floorboards, not the settling of old timber, but a deliberate, resonant complaint. Marcus moved towards the door, his hand reaching for the brass knob. Before his fingers could close around it, The door slammed shut with a concussive force that rattled the glass in the bookshelves. A fine dust, aged and gray, sifted down from the ceiling. He stared at the closed door, the wood now appearing darker, its grain twisting into patterns that seemed to writhe. The house knew. It was no longer passive. He tried the knob. It was locked. Not merely stuck, but locked from the inside, a click echoing from within the mechanism. He backed away, his gaze sweeping the room. The windows, thick with grime and cobwebs, were impossibly high, sealed tight against the outside world. There was no other exit. A flicker of movement caught his eye. It was tall, impossibly thin, and seemed to drink the light from the room. Marcus spun fully, but the figure was gone. He shivered, but not from fear alone. It was a shiver of defiance. He turned back to the door, slamming his shoulder against it. The wood held firm, unyielding. He tried again, grunting with effort, the old timber groaning in response but not giving way. Frustration tightened his jaw. He heard a soft scraping sound from behind him. He spun, his heart thudding a hard, uneven rhythm against his ribs. A spectral hand, translucent and shimmering, reached from the wall beside the fireplace. It was long, skeletal, its fingers tapering to needle-sharp points. It lunged, not at him, but at a heavy, leather-bound tome on a nearby shelf. The book flew from its perch, striking the opposite wall with a dull thud, its pages splaying like broken wings. The hand receded, melting back into the plaster. "You won't stop me," Marcus muttered, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. He picked up the heavy book, its cover embossed with a faded, unreadable symbol. He felt its weight, its solidity. It was real. The house was playing a game, blurring the edges of his perception. He moved to the far wall, searching for an alternative. Perhaps a hidden passage, something Silas might have left. As he did, the wall itself seemed to ripple, the texture beneath his fingers shifting from solid plaster to something slick and damp, like raw clay. He recoiled, pulling his hand back as if burned. The wall returned to its original state, but the sensation lingered, an oily residue on his skin. Then, the floorboards beneath him began to vibrate, not a tremor, but a deliberate rhythmic pulse. A vision erupted around him. The study dissolved, replaced by a churning, sepia-toned tableau. He was no longer Marcus, but another. He wore clothes of a forgotten era, felt a crushing despair that was not his own. The walls of this spectral room pressed inward, the ceiling lowering, dust motes dancing in the sickly light, each one a tiny, screaming face. "Join us." He knew this was the house's ultimate weapon, to consume his mind, to make him one of the forgotten, to show him the fate awaiting him. He tasted the bitterness of fear, sharp and acrid on his tongue, but beneath it, a desperate, stubborn refusal. He was Marcus. He was here, now. He squeezed his eyes shut, fighting the illusion, the crushing despair of the other. He opened his eyes. The vision flickered, then receded, leaving him gasping for breath, his skin clammy. The door was still locked. He understood. The house was not merely trying to scare him. It was trying to break him. But he had seen Silas's plan. He would find a way out of this room, and he would reach the mountain pass. The house had fought back, but he was far from broken. Not yet. Marcus pressed forward, his boot falls echoing unnervingly in the deepening silence. The house no longer merely presented illusions. It was an illusion. A constantly shifting landscape designed to deter. Walls rippled, floors undulated, and the familiar scent of dust and decaying wood gave way to a cold mineral tang that prickled his nostrils. He was beyond the main structure now, descending into what felt like the very bedrock the manor had been built upon. He repeated it like a mantra, each syllable a tiny anchor in the swirling chaos of his mind. Yet, it was all he had. The passage narrowed, the ancient stones slick with moisture. It was the house's pulse, he realized, the rhythm of its insidious consumption. Beyond lay not another chamber, but a swirling vortex of sensory input. The temperature plummeted, his vision blurred, the rough-hewn walls of the manor's foundation dissolving into sheer gray rock faces. He was no longer in the house. He was in the mountain pass. The narrow, winding road, treacherous with ice, stretched before him. The same pass he had traversed weeks ago, driving towards this isolated manor, dismissing the warnings of the local proprietor as quaint superstition. Now the pass was alive. The engine of his car roared, straining against the incline, but he wasn't driving. He was standing, freezing, the wind tearing at his clothes. Headlights, spectral and blinding, materialized out of the swirling snow, rushing towards him with impossible speed. This was not a memory. It was a forcible reenactment, designed to trap him, to make him relive the journey endlessly, to break his will before he reached his destination. This is not real. The thought was a faint echo, almost swallowed by the howling wind. He clenched his fists, digging his nails into his palms, the sharp pain a desperate anchor. I am in the house. I am Marcus. He forced his eyes open wider, straining to pierce the illusion. The gray rock faces flickered, briefly revealing the damp stone of the passage. The roar of the phantom engine morphed into the low thrum of the house. The scent of pine vanished, replaced by the metallic tang. With a gasp, he broke free. The hum was louder now, a deep, resonant throb that filled the small, circular chamber he had stumbled into. This was it, the heart of the house. The chamber was ancient, carved directly into the raw earth beneath the manor, not built. It was a space of primitive, unsettling geometry, rough-hewn walls converging towards a central, shallow depression in the floor. It was not beautiful. It was predatory, the eye of the storm. Marcus felt a profound revulsion, a primal fear that tightened his stomach into a knot. This was the source, the nexus where the house's insatiable hunger originated. He could feel it now, the subtle, ceaseless drain on his own vitality, his memories, his very sense of self. He reached into his satchel, his fingers fumbling for the object he had prepared. It was a small, lead-lined box, sealed with an intricate tarnished silver clasp. Inside, wrapped in linen, was a fragment of petrified wood, imbued with properties that, according to the ancient texts, could disrupt the flow of certain telluric energies. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble based on esoteric lore, but it was his only hope. As he pulled the box free, the house recoiled. The hum intensified, becoming a piercing shriek that vibrated through his bones. He staggered, nearly dropping the box. The house was fighting back, unleashing its full psychological arsenal. It wanted him to surrender, to become another forgotten echo within its walls. But Marcus clenched his jaw, forcing himself to take a step forward. He would not. He was here now. He had a purpose. Fting, mutable thing that sought to unravel his very being. Marcus stumbled, his outstretched hand meeting not the expected damp stone, but a surface that yielded like ancient rotted velvet. A low hum vibrated against his palm, a sound not of vibration, but of deep, resonant presence. The metallic scent intensified, now overlaid with something else, cloyingly sweet, like decaying blossoms. He fought the urge to gag, his mind struggling to anchor itself against the house's relentless assault. He had to understand its nature, not just its effects. It consumed, yes, but how? And what did it become after consumption? His vision blurred, the corridor around him dissolving into a swirling vortex of sepia-toned images. A child's forgotten toy, a woman weeping into a lace handkerchief, a man's furious contorted face. These weren't just visions. They were fragments, echoes of lives consumed, pressed against his own consciousness, threatening to overwhelm it. He felt their emotions, their despair, their final futile resistance. This was the house's absorption, a slow, agonizing digestion of identity. He clenched his jaw, forcing his gaze inward, away from the seductive chaos. He was Marcus. He was here. A sudden sharp cold enveloped him. The air thinned, biting at his exposed skin. The floor beneath his boots was no longer yielding velvet, nor the familiar stone, but loose, sharp scree. He looked up, and the low, vaulted ceiling was gone, replaced by a vast, bruised sky, heavy with impending storm. Jagged peaks, dark and menacing, loomed on either side, their craggy faces dusted with remnants of old snow. He was standing on a narrow ledge, a precarious mountain pass, wind whipping at his clothes, threatening to send him tumbling into the dizzying chasm below. This was a new trick, a grander illusion, designed to shatter his perception of the house entirely. But a part of him, a stubborn, analytical core, recognized the impossible shift. The metallic scent, the sickly sweet perfume, still clung to the air, an incongruous detail in this alpine desolation. He focused on it, a tiny thread connecting him to the true reality. The house was showing him its ultimate power, not just to distort, but to replace reality. No, he rasped, the word torn from his throat by the illusory wind. This isn't real. The mountain pass seemed to sneer, the wind howling a derisive laugh. Succumb to the despair, accept the illusion, and his essence would be smoothly integrated, another forgotten memory added to its vast internal archive. Or fight and be torn apart, his consciousness scattered like dust. He pictured the house, not as a structure, but as a monstrous living organism, its roots deep in the earth, its ancient timbers, its skeletal frame. He had spent months studying its history, its architecture, its legends. He knew its secrets, its patterns, its hunger. It fed on memory. He opened his eyes. He raised his hand, not to brace himself, but to push against the illusion. He saw the shimmering distortion, like heat haze, where the rock face should have been solid. "You want my memories?" he murmured, his voice strangely calm now, a quiet defiance against the roaring wind. "You can have them." He delved into his own mind, not resisting, but actively offering. He didn't offer the easy ones, the pleasant ones, the ones it might find digestible. He offered the chaos, the doubt, the relentless questioning. He flooded his mind with the intricate historical data he'd accumulated, the dry facts, the contradictory sources, the unanswerable questions of a lifetime of research. It was like offering a starving beast a feast of razor blades. The hum intensified, becoming a frantic, discordant whine. The mountain pass flickered, the sharp edges of the rock dissolving into the blurred lines of a library shelf, then a grimy kitchen, then a ballroom. He felt a searing pain, not physical, but a mental tearing, as if a part of his mind was being ripped away. He screamed, a sound swallowed by the internal tempest. He saw himself, a fleeting, ghost-like image, standing in the manor's great hall, his eyes wide, his mouth agape. The pressure eased. The metallic, sweet smell faded. The chaotic visions ceased. Marcus stood, not on a mountain pass, but in a vast, echoing chamber, the air still and heavy, smelling faintly of dust and forgotten things. He looked down at his hands. They were his, pale and trembling. He tried to recall his childhood home, the face of a distant relative, the title of his favorite book. Nothing. A vast blank expanse. He had inflicted a wound, perhaps. Or perhaps he had simply offered the house a more potent, more destructive form of sustenance. He was still Marcus, he thought, a name without a history, a consciousness without a past. He felt no fear, no despair, only a quiet, unnerving calm. He raised his hand and traced a pattern on the grimy stone wall. Marcus felt a subtle shift within him, a strange, nascent connection to the very fabric of the house. He was no longer just an inhabitant. He was something else. He walked forward, his footsteps no longer echoing, but somehow absorbed, softened by the ancient floor. He was no longer trying to escape. He was simply moving through the house, with the house, a new kind of memory, a new kind of sentinel. The house had consumed him, yes, but in its consumption, had it also become him? He did not care. The quiet hum was comforting now, a lullaby of endless forgotten lives.